We'll get there. Kia ora and welcome to chapter 14. This is the final chapter, but it's not the least of the chapters. And really what we must make sure is that as educators we have a language of learning that we are using consistently. And it's the consistency of that language that's critical here. The vocabulary needs to be fairly broad, and what we want to be able to do is actually unpack the language of learning as if it was a competency, but it isn't, of course. It's a capability set. And we've unpacked some fairly significant concepts around building some understanding, making sure that we have some techniques, and then seeing how we can actually roll those out as dispositions. And this follows the frameworks that we've been using for the rest of the competencies. Now, some of those things are like building a well-defined learning vocabulary so we can discuss learning effectively. Okay, and this is a foundational sort of space here. We can improve our language of learning by providing feedback on each other's learning, and that's one of the techniques we use to build the language of learning. And eventually we want to be able to build communication fluency to enable greater effectiveness and efficiency in the learning that happens in our classrooms. And so the language of learning is not a competency, but it is a key capability and an outcome from language use within the context of the competencies. There are a number of emergent literacies, and they're well documented, and there's lots of them. And to give you some examples, we've got things like critical literacy in the world of fake news. That's obviously quite a big gig. Basic literacy that we understand through our reading and writing and be able to build vocabulary through reading and writing. Information literacy, technological literacy, media literacy, cultural literacy, which also incorporates our global awareness, scientific literacy, cognitive literacy. And the cognitive literacy is the one that we're focusing on here in particular, because what we want to make sure is our young learners have this wide-ranging vocabulary around learning. And in order to develop that, we've put in the resource a series of tables looking at different types of questions, and questioning is really trying to generate an increased vocabulary. Okay, so we can have things like reflective questions. We can look at metacognitive questions, predictive questions, future-focused questions, and once again there is quite a few different labels that we can use for this. But then we want to try and unpack them. And once again we've used the simple taxonomy of surface, deep and profound from John West Burnham, and what we want to look at here is at a surface level. What we've got is questions like, what was the most difficult aspect of the learning process that you encountered this time through? Yeah. What was that process? What were the difficulties you found with it? And when we go to deep, we'll say things like, what refinements of the learning process did you apply this time? So we're moving from surface to a deeper level. And finally, to a profound level, we can talk about things like, through reflective questioning, what was the key thinking strategy that you used on this concept framework? And how will you develop that further? And so once again, if we look at reflective questions, we can actually go from a surface level understanding capability through to a deep understanding capability through to a profound capability. We can look at metacognitive questions. Which of your contributions to the learning process did you enjoy most? And why did you enjoy that specific aspect? Okay, at a surface level, we can get feedback from learners at a very early age on that. If we look at a deeper level for our metacognitive questions, we can ask things like, what was especially satisfying about the learning process or the finished result that you ended up with? And at a deep level, that's a deep level, and at a profound level, what emotions did you feel that drove you to want to find a solution? What engaged that curiosity? Okay, that deep sense of, I have to find an answer here. So literacy is a critical aspect of this piece of work, and we want to develop a common literacy which everybody understands. We need to know the difference between ideas and concepts. We need to understand the difference between and be able to apply them correctly, innovation and ingenuity, imagination and creativity. And there's a whole host of words that we use on a day-to-day basis that we haven't actually defined well. And so quite often we have conversations around the language of learning, using the language of learning, and we get tripped up by it. Yeah, I've got a great idea. Really, is that an idea, or do you just know something, or do you actually have a conceptual framework around that? We're starting to be much more critical of our own processes of learning within our classrooms. And building this language of learning is an absolutely critical part of that process. The deeper the language, the more clarity we have around the language, then the more effectively we can have conversations with learners about their learning, and learners can have conversation with their peers around their learning. And that will be consistent. Now, this is not going to be built up immediately. This is going to take quite some time to build a capability over years that the learners are at school for, so that when they go into their workplace, when they talk about their learning, they can have conversations which are very specific. So thank you very much, and I hope that's worthwhile, and I hope you got to chapter 14, and we wish you all the very best with the projects you're involved in around the world, and hopefully we'll see you somewhere in the world somewhere soon. Thank you very much.